So the thing that I've been diving deeper into is how we source truth, and specifically from a meta view. And so I guess I'd like to explore the process when we have information that appears legitimate from sources that we think are legitimate. However, how do we actually know? Like, so as an example, in the pharmaceutical world, prescriptions, right, have been approved by the FDA, and that should give us a sense of like it's legit and it's been tested and it's for our best good. And you can take it out of pharmaceuticals and put it in the energy world, or like, and basically in any situation. So how do we know that the people who are actually reporting on this information are legitimate and providing accurate information? How do we source our truth?
Yeah, that's a good one. In fact, it's one, as you know, Risa, we work with a lot within the New Human University. And in fact, we have calls today in the New Human University. We have a New Human University call, and then a New Human University elite group call, both today, where those are topics that we get very, very deep into. And it's, well, we could obviously talk for hours about that. So let me try to get it as honed in as possible. But to say, and for this to be dialogue based, right? And make sure I'm moving in the right direction. And hopefully this will open up some query or comments or questions from everyone. But it's a very interesting question, and it is quite potentially one of the most important questions facing us right now. And it basically is, how do we, it's in philosophy, they call it epistemology. How do you know what's true? How do you know what you know? Why do you believe what you believe is true? And so the first thing to me that's critically important, and that we're able to start doing when we're able to start taking this meta view, when we're able to start accessing higher capacity of our brain and higher capacity of our mind, we're able to start getting what I call this view from 50,000 feet, where we can see more. The challenge is, until that happens, is we are looking through some particular stage of consciousness. And it's a filter. We're looking through a filter. And the major filters in Western culture are the traditional value systems. It's often mythic literal beliefs. It's sometimes trending towards ethnocentricity. Or we're looking through the modernist filter, the modernist stage of consciousness, which is very science-oriented, objective-oriented, and empirical-oriented, very achievement-oriented. It's one of the things that are really being brought to bear about what's become problematic in that worldview, that when all of this achievement towards just money, for instance, is a driving force, then we end up wrecking the environment and creating these unequal wealth distributions and all of this stuff. And then the third major value system that most Westerners look through has been the leading edge for about 50 years. And that's where most of the people that come into this movement, that's what we're looking through, which is a compliment. We've been at the leading edge. We're showing up at the leading edge of the evolution of consciousness. The problem is it's still what they call in spiral dynamics a first tier value system or filter or stage of development, which means we have a hard time seeing out of it. So we're looking through it. It's not until we move to this meta mind or this higher brain, higher mind capacity that we can look at it as opposed to looking through it. And so the challenge is that now what's happened is we've grown into this next stage of evolution, this what's called the green meme or postmodernity or pluralism, where most of us source our values and, listen to this, source our truth from, right? The challenge within it is that when we moved up into that, we needed to transcend and include the traditional stage, the modernist stage, and go beyond them into this postmodernist or pluralistic stage. And so one of the things that happens at that stage, at that postmodern stage, is it starts to despise the stages below it, because it sees, for instance, modernity or modern consciousness as what's creating these like potential totalitarian control mechanisms within social media companies, Facebook, Google, all of this stuff. It sees the degradation of the environment. It sees a proliferation of nuclear weapons, all of this that came out of the modern mind, right? And so it starts to then despise everything about that. And it starts to become what we call deconstructive. It starts to just kind of tear everything apart. So here's the challenge. When you start to tear everything apart, you damn well better have the capacity to put something higher together, or you're just left with ruins. And that's what's happening to us right now. And so two important features to how we have to discern truth, first of all, is not to go into this postmodern nihilism or this postmodern deconstruction where we simply say, there just is no truth, and I'm going to sit here depressed and watching the world fall apart around me. One of the things that is important is that we can apply critical thinking. Critical thinking is actually a hallmark of the modernist stage, the scientific method, critical analysis. And once we started seeing all the bad things that come out of that stage of consciousness, we started throwing everything out, including as we move up into this postmodern stage, we start to reject rationality. But we're meant to transcend and include it. We're meant to transcend it where we can tap into trans-rational truths, where we can let salutogenesis, where we feel a hit inside of us, for instance, that says no, or yes. There's a truth that I'm feeling on a deep intuitive level that I know with every core of my being. We start to cultivate that, a trans-rational mode of knowing. And we want to be able to listen to that voice. Here's where it gets tricky, and this is critically important. That voice is not anti-rational. It is trans-rational or post-rational. It includes rationality and critical thinking, because so often what's happening when we can't make sense of the world, this is what's happening. We have a meaning-making crisis in the world right now, a meaning-making crisis, and it's leading people into deep despair. And what can happen if we can't move above and beyond and start sourcing truth is that we move below. And we start to then grab onto these primitive instincts or these mythic or magical ways of seeing the world that are actually pre-rational. And this is regressive, not progressive. So the key here, a key understanding of this is to know that we are in what many people call this liminal stage. We're between worlds right now. We're trying to bust out of the modern, postmodern world, but we have yet to create what I call Epoch 6, or the integral world, or this new meta-modern stage of development. So we're in this liminal place, and we're trying to figure all of this out. And as we're figuring all of this out, this technology and the 9 summits that goes from here in the New Human University are designed to help us cultivate those trans-rational capacities to source truth intuition and insight. The Rebecca Costa, the sociobiologist, actually required reading in the New Human University, has demonstrated that the prefrontal cortex, these higher untapped capacities of the brain, the source code meditation is waking up, have the ability for transrational, and this is like Harvard lecturer, right? This is not New Age hyperbole. These higher potentials of the prefrontal cortex give us the capacity for flashes of insight and intuition that we can't get through rational logic. But again, the key is to understand they're not anti-rational. So one of the problems, Risa, that is showing up right now when we're in this liminal stage, when we're in this deconstruction, when we're in this meaning crisis, is there's so much regression back to pre-rational, magic, mythic ways of seeing the world that are actually taking us in the wrong direction. And we have to take a stand for the cultivation of these trans-rational, beyond rational, that include rational. And I will say that that two things need to happen, Risa, to get right to your question. Two things need to happen. Most everyone that's in the green meme or the postmodern space, which again has been the leading edge of evolution, there has been a real tendency to reject everything modernist. Along with it, critical thinking. One of the things that could benefit the people filling the yoga studios, the mindfulness communities, the spiritual but not religious, the unity churches, all of these non-modernist mainstream things that we do, an important thing to do would be to understand that pre-rational and trans-rational are different, and to hone our critical thinking skills. Because we don't want to just think nonsensical. And so honing our critical thinking skills to really understand critical thinking, to study our own, how do we source truth? This is where it maybe starts, to make a commitment to say, why do I believe what I believe? How do I know what's true? And one of the ways that we can't let go of is the ability for critical thought. Some things are just solved like that. Some things are just silly new age notions that are just magical thinking. And to just apply some reason to them. So honing our ability to reason is important. And the next thing is cultivating that which is beyond reason, above reason, outside of reason, that emerges in Epoch 6, that is intuition, insight, systems seeing, what's called vision logic, the ability to recognize patterns before you can intellectualize them. And this process, and particularly beyond this into the 9 summits, really is designed to cultivate those abilities. So two things. Let's hone our critical thinking so we're not being regressive and just thinking magically. And let's cultivate our trans-rational capacities through this work by waking up the parts of the brain and the parts of the mind that allow us to generate intuition and insight. And this salutogenic mechanism starts to become, in Summit 9, we actually work with that, a Thrive style. It starts to become a guide, a truth guide within you. It starts to have a guiding effect. Part of the intuition is being driven through the inner sense of the response of salutogenesis in your body. Okay, so that's an important topic to me, and there's layers of it that we could talk about forever. So I might have got a little beyond what your actual question was, but I'm gonna dial it in and saying there's the important thing. First of all, is to understand the difference between what's pre-rational and what's trans or post-rational. Right? Through development, we move through development from archaic, which are these instinctual fight or flight ways to see the world, into magic and mythic ways to see the world, into rational modernist ways to see the world, into postmodern pluralistic ways to see the world, where most of us are at. Now we need to go beyond. We don't need to go back. We don't need to go back to magic, mythic thinking. We need to go beyond to Epoch 6, to deeper vision, logic, intuition, insight, and higher level pattern recognition within the world. And that comes through development. And through doing this work, it starts to simply show up.